WOCA. Ocala. All right, 5 minutes after 10 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in. Beautiful Wednesday. Hope you are doing well. If you are a veteran, you know WOCA salutes you. We've been one of those stations that just has made it part of our mission to make sure we honor our veterans. Can you imagine, when you fly anywhere, like on a commercial airline, you're approximately at 30,000 feet. I'm not a pilot, but I think that's what they tell you, right? 30,000 feet. So can you imagine being up there? Now, this is hard to imagine because you figure you're just dead, okay?
Yeah.
And the airplane that you're in collides with another airplane, all right? That in and of itself is enough to make you say, well, that's when I meet my maker, right?
Right.
What if the plane you're in is carrying bombs? Holy mackerel. That happened to one of our next guests, and his nephew has written about it and so much else. Let me just tell you, before we say hello to them, a little bit about Major Don Harten and Craig Collins. Major Don Harten retired from the United States Air Force. He was the only pilot who flew in Vietnam from when the very first bomb was dropped in February of 1965 to when the last bomb was dropped at the end of the Vietnam War. Wow. He survived, and here's the part I was just telling you about. He survived a midair collision at 30,000 feet with two bomb-laden B-52s over a Category 5 super typhoon over the South China Sea during the onset of the Vietnam War. And he's on the phone to talk to us about it. He went on to become a professional drummer, by the way.
Yep.
His nephew has written about his uncle, obviously very, very proud. I heard Major Harten tell you, Robin, that he's not a hero. I think the rest of the world would disagree, sir. Craig Collins has written this book. It's a wonderful book called Midair. Craig is a very talented journalist, a researcher. He served as a senior executive for Fortune 500 companies. He won a number of professional awards for writing. And Midair is the name of the book. Midair, an epic tale of survival and a mission that might have ended the Vietnam War. It is the true story of Major Don Harten, and it is the true story of Uncle Don Harten from Craig's perspective. Good morning to both of you, Major Harten and Craig Collins. Good morning, sirs.
Well, good morning. How are you doing?
We're doing good. That sounds like Major Harten right there. Am I right?
Yes.
Yeah.
You are a hero, sir. Thank you so much for what you've done.
I know he exaggerates a lot, but Craig's a great guy. But boy, I don't know. I guess when you do things like this and when you survive stuff like that, you don't think of it at the time, and then you don't really. I cannot. I've given many speeches about this head-on midair collision at two B-52s, and I cannot think about it before I talk about it. It's impossible. It took me 35 years to write a word about it.
Really? 35 years to write a word about it? How did you survive? Did you parachute out of it? How did you...
Okay, just briefly, we went off on the first Vietnam raid. First time SAC ever went to war, Strategic Air Command, and two B-52s. We had 30 B-52s coming out of Guam for a target that should have been the Phu Quien airfield northwest of Hanoi. Instead, we waited 4.5 months to bomb a nothing target in South Vietnam. And on the way, we met up with a typhoon that sucked us in, and we were 9 minutes early, so our leader did a 360. And when we got halfway around it, I looked up, and there's a B-52 coming straight at me at 1,100 miles an hour. And it hit within about a second and a half, maybe 2 seconds. And we just splatted together and blew our right wing off, knocked their tail off. They went into a spin, and we went straight down. And when I ejected, I said I thought we were straight and level. Tried to fly the plane for a little bit, not realizing, because everything went black when we lost all the electricity from the alternators on the right wing, we were going straight down. So I'm trying to fly it, and then somebody ejected, and I decided it's time to jettison the airplane. So I reached down and pulled on the handles. The left one came up, the right one would not. The left one would not fire. And I figured I'm going to die here in a couple of seconds. So I squeezed it again, and it fired. I was out of position. It broke my neck. I had a broken neck for 49 years. Anyway, it landed in the water, and the waves were 70 feet high, according to Craig. He's researched it, and it was the fourth largest typhoon in the history of the world. So I don't know. It was exciting. I can say that.
Wow. How many?
Just one thing I wanted to say is when I realized we were going to hit, I looked up, and here comes the B-52, and it was one light, and then it kind of split, and this all took place in about 2 seconds. And it just slowed down to almost each microsecond seemed like a minute. And this thing came right at me, and a drop tank came into the cockpit, and it just kind of slowly slid underneath, and this great big tail went sliding by on the right. I figured, woo, we missed, and then I realized, no, we're going to hit, and we hit and blew, and everything went to heck after that.
Oh, holy cow. And I'm guessing some of the people on the two planes died?
Oh, yeah, it killed 8 guys. I was the only pilot of the group that survived.
Wow. And how long were you in the water before you were rescued?
It was about 5 hours, and then the rescue plane was an SA-16 Albatross, and it picked up 4 of us. Well, actually 5 of us. One guy was already dead. And it picked up 3 navigators and me, and we floated around for a little while, but when it had landed in those big waves, it cracked the hull, and it was sinking. And we didn't realize that at the time. And then I'm sitting there, they strapped me in, took all my clothes off and strapped me in and gave me half of a Mae West to get rid of my seasickness. And I looked down and I told the PJ, the parajumper there, I said, hey, look at this. And this red bilge cover on the floor popped up and floated down the cabin aisle. And I said, uh-oh, we're in trouble. And he said, yeah, we're going to take off now. And so we tried to take off, and we got about 100 feet in the air, and then it stalled out and crashed. And it was a worse crash than the B-52 Midair. But
I don't know what a Mae West is except for the actress. What is a Mae West?
Oh, a Mae West, that's your little flotation device under your arms. They called it a Mae West because when you pop the buttons, you pull a string there, it blows these things up, and they look like Mae West.
Oh, gotcha. Now I got
big Mae West.
Oh, my gosh. Okay. Craig, I have a question for you. When did you first hear this story that your uncle just told?
Well, I first heard it when I was probably 5 years old, and actually my mother got a call that my uncle had survived, and she got interviewed by the Associated Press, and one of the comments she made was, my dad was nervous with my uncle driving the family station wagon, and now he's crashing, multi-million-dollar jet.
Wow.
And that went out over the AP wire, so my uncle always appreciated that quote from my mom. But anyway, the very first story I ever told in public was in kindergarten, and it was about 2 months after my uncle's crash, and I went to kindergarten for show and tell, and I had a newspaper clipping of my uncle's crash and a model of the B-52, and I told that story in public, which is truly one of the most astonishing survival stories in the history of aviation, going back to the Wright brothers. And I've been fascinated and obsessed with the story ever since. So.
Wow. So was it hard to get to fill in the blanks? I'm sure that you needed more information in order to write the book.
Well, the fascinating thing was that I've heard this story since I was a kid, and I've also heard my uncle talk about, different aspects of the war, and I talked to him several times about it. But with the Internet, you can go back and check things and really dive deeply into what happened in the war and what happened with my uncle. And my uncle kind of has this photographic memory, and kind of the remarkable thing was everything I looked up on the Internet was completely true, what my uncle has always said. And it was, I looked up on a NOAA website, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and there was Super Typhoon Dinah, and it had 185-mile-an-hour winds, 70-foot waves, and NOAA ranked it as the 4th largest typhoon of the 20th century. So I always thought my uncle kind of parachuted into some rainy weather with a little bit of wind, but no, that wasn't the case. It was like parachuting into Hurricane Katrina. So it was, really remarkable what I was able to dig up with the Internet.
Major Harten, did you pass out at all during those 5 hours in the water?
No, not in the water. I passed out for maybe half a second as I ejected because my neck was out of line. It broke my neck, actually. and it was a wild ride. And I went out. I sensed the big tail going by, and just then everything blew up, and something hit me in my left calf, and just mangled my left calf and pulled my left leg and left hip out of socket. But the VA says, no, you're crazy as heck, but we're not going to give you a disability for that, but you're crazy, so we'll give you post-traumatic stress.
Oh, my gosh. All right.
It drives me nuts.
I don't mean to get political, but I'm sure you have some thoughts on this. Two thoughts on that are kind of political. One is the way we as Americans responded to the return of the Vietnam soldiers was horrible. I mean, we just dropped the ball. We didn't do it right, and we need to owe you all an apology for that.
We've all accepted that by now, and the first time anybody ever said thank you for your service was I was in Mexico, central Mexico, and it was about 1995. And I'm sitting there, and I didn't know what they were talking about. And he said, thank you for your service. And you mean my military service? He said, yes. And I just couldn't believe it. Nobody had ever said anything about it. My family, most of my family, except Craig and a couple others, just they didn't want to hear it. And nobody wanted to. I needed to talk about it. My post-traumatic stress, I've got a lot of it with 5 combat tours. And I really needed to talk about some of this, and the only person that seemed to listen was my dad. And I just finally gave up. It just drove me nuts, and I had to go through some psychotherapy to get over this for a while, and finally made it through.
So you mentioned that had this mission that the crash was heading toward had it been successful, the war could have been over. And then you mentioned that there was bombing ordered on an empty area of South Vietnam. So that sounds political in nature to me. It sounds like it was all for show. That second.
It was Lyndon Johnson and Robert McNamara's complete disregard of sanity, I think. What happened was on February 7th, 1965, the VC attacked one of our strongholds and killed 28 of our Special Forces advisors in Pleiku, South Vietnam. On February 11th, he deployed 2 wings of B-52s to Guam. We got there, and our mission was to bomb the Phu Quien airfield northwest of Hanoi by flying over Hanoi and Haiphong at around 500 feet MSL, meaning mean sea level, meaning we're probably going over the town at about 300 feet with 30 B-52s. About 2 minutes later, we'd pop up and drop 1,530 bombs on the Phu Quien airfield. It would have got their attention. Instead, we waited 4.5 months and then dropped on a nothing target in South Vietnam, and that's what they kept dropping on, was nothing targets in South Vietnam, using the B-52 for tactical scare and the F-105 and F-4 for strategic bombing in North Vietnam. And they just got it all backwards. And I'm going to say this. Politicians have no business trying to be generals. They don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
They don't know strategies. They don't know anything.
I think you're right. Craig, did you have a hard time avoiding the political aspects of the Vietnam War when you wrote the book?
No, not really. I've been a student of the Vietnam War for years. Actually, I grew up hearing about it, obviously, just like any other American, and it was also personal because my uncle was over there.
Yeah.
And then I also minored in political science in college and took several courses on the Cold War and the Vietnam War, etc. So I've always been fascinated with it. But the thing that my uncle has always contended was that serious bombing effort over Hanoi to the military targets in and around Hanoi in February of 1965 likely would have ended the Vietnam War before it ever got started, and the conflict would have lasted likely about 3 days. And my uncle's always contended that. Military historians since then have lined up in droves to agree with my uncle. It's hard to say what would happen in history, but one of the things that they contend was that McNamara's strategy of gradualism and bombing the jungle midsection of Vietnam with small fighter jets rather than going after the kind of the head of the Vietnam military operation in and around Hanoi was a massive strategic blunder, and probably one of the biggest strategic blunders in the history of U.S. Military activity. So I think that part is very clear, and I think that my uncle's been heavily vindicated through the years.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I can say something, if you don't mind, right here. that at the very end of my fourth combat tour, it turned out to be, I was flying F-105s, and I was leading 6 missions over North Vietnam during a bomb halt in December 1968. That Lyndon Johnson wanted to prove that the North Vietnamese were violating their bomb halt agreement. And I went over there, and we took photos, and I escorted the Recce Birds, and I was leading 6 flights of these. I lost a wingman who got an Air Force Cross for this, but as we went through, I looked down the Mugia Pass on just one banked angle and just took one glance. There's 150 trucks right there in front of me. And we were about a mile above, just doing a combat weave above the roads and the rivers, and they were bringing down everything in violation of everything they'd ever said. And Lyndon Johnson, he took these photos, because we lost Dick Alley, and it was just pretty bad. We took all these photos and sent them to the White House immediately, and he didn't do anything about them. It just blew my mind, and I realized this war is being run for politicians and not for the military, because we could end it any time we wanted. All we had to do was put those photos out and say, hey, they violated it, it's time to stop this, and we could have ended the war right there. Again, we won that war about 6 times over.
And
Totally won it.
Yeah, and what you're saying right there just reinforces our belief, or our opinion, I guess, maybe, that we may not have been in favor of the war or the way the war was conducted, but we certainly owe all of the veterans, a standing salute and a thank you for what you did. That wall in Washington, D.C. that remembers all those who died in that war is testimony to the fact that, the generation that fought the Vietnam War, really was disrespected by the rest of us at that time.
I can stand at the deep V at the wall. Second slab on the right, about heart level, are the names of 8 guys killed in my B-52 crash. But the last slab, the one on the left of the deep V, there's 10 F-111 guys and 2 F-105 guys that I flew with on that side. I can touch 2 slabs and touch 20 guys.
Wow.
It's just sad, and especially when we could have won the war and ended it any time we wanted. Wow. And we did, in fact, but the politicians wouldn't let us do it.
Yeah.
And Craig, how did you keep your objectivity through writing the book? Because obviously you and your uncle are very, very close, so it had to be very emotional for you.
Yeah, that was kind of an interesting thing. I just went through and kind of followed the facts and kind of what I knew about Vietnam. And the thing that just astonished me most of the way through writing the book was that my uncle was right about just about everything he said. so he would tell me these stories, and I would kind of go, maybe it's half true or whatever. But in doing the research, it really was all true. And we have, the guy who wrote the foreword to the book, Charles Camps, is a military historian and instructor in Montgomery, Alabama, for one of the U.S. Air Force's military colleges there. And he wrote a foreword basically confirming that had this mission started in February 1965, had it gone through and not been canceled, this B-52 mission over Hanoi, that the war would have likely ended quickly. So it was interesting, and I have a far deeper respect for what my uncle did after writing the book than even before, which was pretty deep respect even then. So it's just astonishing what my uncle did. So
I'm sorry.
That's kind of my perspective on that.
Major, did you? Yeah, it sounded like you wanted to say something there.
Oh no, I was just agreeing with. I forget what it was, but not important.
Major, when you said that your dad was about the only person that would listen to you, was your dad in the service?
He never was. Of all things, he had 4 kids in World War II or something like that. So they wouldn't draft him, and he was working in a government. He was working on a railroad, and they wouldn't. It was necessary. So he didn't get to go to any war, but he sure. That was the one thing in my life it seemed like he respected me for, and he listened to everything I had to say about it. And he always wanted me to give speeches when I'd get home.
Really? And so
Yeah.
Craig was just a child at that time. So was it surprising to you that Craig sort of filled the shoes that your father once filled?
Well, yes and no, but Dad was, well, he was just my God, and Craig was my little nephew that I knew he loved me, and I just loved him. When he was young, he was cute. I mean, really. And so I just really went for these kids. But no, I don't know. Anyway, life was life, and fun was fun, and I'll tell you, after that, I really got an appreciation for life.
And you're a drummer, so drummers usually have an appreciation for life. You have to.
That was because my dad said drummers are just musicians with their brains knocked out, and when I was 13 years old, he said, you're going to be my drummer.
Oh,
and he made me his drummer in his dance band, and it didn't work for the first night. He never played there again. But I got good after a while. By the time I was just before my 18th birthday, I got to sit in with Louis Armstrong. But I worked my way through high school and college playing drums, and then went into the Air Force.
Wow. Craig, how's that? I'm sorry, Major, go ahead.
I always wanted to fly. Anyway, go ahead.
Craig, I wanted to ask you about the book itself, about your profession. I mean, you're a journalist, and that background as a journalist probably is why the book is so well written. What feedback have you had, or is the book just brand new? Did it just come out?
No, it came out a few months ago, and it's available on Amazon.com and Barnes & Noble. It's also available in an audio-book as well as an e-book, so it's available in just about any media. This is a story that I've wanted to tell forever. I can hardly sit through, I'll go see a war movie or a war history movie, and I can hardly sit through the movie because I look at it and I say, that's interesting, but my uncle's story is much more interesting.
More
exciting.
Oh, yeah.
Historical. So that's one of the things that really attracted me to it, and one of the things that it's just such a deep, rich story. You have this incredible, seat of your pants ride through a typhoon and a B-52 crash. You have 5 tours of duty in Vietnam over 3 different jets. And then you have the historical implications, and then also it's kind of a character analysis of what kind of person would, after crashing the way he did in the B-52 on his very first mission, most people would be afraid to even step in an airplane again.
Yeah, really.
Yet he went on to do 5 tours of duty, and from 1965 to 1972. So that was remarkable. So that kind of wrote itself.
Yeah, right.
It's called Survivor's Guilt. Survivor's Guilt. That's what drove me. I didn't realize it for many, many years. Even after I retired, I wasn't sure what was going on. Anything. I was just a confused mess.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
But it was survivor's guilt, and I got to say this: I thoroughly enjoyed the combat flying. It was the best flying you could get. Sure, it was dangerous as heck, but the guys you're with are the greatest in the world, and you're part of this. And what's really, really neat is last week, I never flew F-86s, but I always admired the plane and the people. And last week they had their last F-86 reunion here in Las Vegas, and I was there.
Wow.
And it was the greatest thing. And all my buddies, a lot of buddies flew F-86s. They were older than me. And we have these other reunions, and they're so much fun to get together and see these guys and talk to them. And I've got friends that you wouldn't believe from that.
Major Don Harten, thank you so much. We salute you. Thank you for your service, sir. And Craig, thank you for telling us this story. This story needed to be told. I don't know if Hollywood is going to knock on your door or not, but I hope they pick the right actors.
Yeah, exactly. And we're in kind of discussions right now, so that's our plan. I'd love to see this on the silver screen. It deserves it.
And I'd love to fly one more B-52 co-pilot combat mission.
Oh no, we don't want you to do that. No.
I would love to fly again, but I'm scared of flying now.
So somehow I don't believe that. Craig and Major Don, thank you so much. The book is called Midair. I've been keeping the cover of the book on our podcast the whole time, so that's what it looks like. Go buy it anywhere books are sold, and call me if you want the one that was sent to me. I'll give it to you. Major Don Harten and Craig Collins, again, thank you both for being on the air with us today.
Thank you
Mike.
so much.
All right, we'll be right back.
Fox News Radio, I'm Lillian Wu. A lot of Democrats questioning the president's firing of FBI Director James Comey. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer calling for a special prosecutor in the probe into Russian interference in our election.
They fired Sally Yates. They fired Preet Bharara. And now they fired Director Comey, the very man leading the investigation.
President Trump pushing back on Twitter.
The Democrats have said some of the worst things about James Comey, including the fact that he should be fired. But now they play so sad. He added James Comey will be replaced by someone who will do a far better job.
Fox's Kevin Corke. Russia's highest level meeting so far of this administration taking place this morning, a face-to-face between the Russian foreign minister and President Trump at the White House. And a North Carolina high school student arrested after police find weapons and a hit list in his book bag. Fox News, we report, you decide.
Ace is the place with the helpful hardware, folks.
Spring is here and your local Ace has everything you need for your lawn and garden. Now through Monday only, save up to 25% on key items across the store, like Miracle-Gro